I asked very soon after these attacks start what the Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand might say about it. And in case you don't know who they are, they purport, though they do not, to represent Islamic women in New Zealand. The Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand came to prominence after the 2019 mosque attacks in which 51 people died in Christchurch and 40 were injured. They have been embraced generally by the left as the people who speak with the strongest voice for those affected by the mosque massacre. They are strong advocates for restrictions to our freedom of speech, and they spend much of their time, or their leadership spend much of their time, claiming New Zealand is a racist, misogynistic country, and we've got to clean our act up and that we have institutional racism. They are not backward in coming forward, the Islamic Women's Council, but they, and as people who I guess came to prominence because of an act of terrorism, as we call it, an act of terrorism, I thought that group would be able to identify with the feelings of those victimised and traumatised by the attacks in Israel, and I expected a strong message of support from the Islamic Women's Council for those suffering and for the victims of the terror attacks in Israel. But after 2 days, they have issued, and I am not going to do it the dignity of reading it to you, they issued a 8-paragraph statement which fails utterly to condemn the Hamas attacks and instead suggests that they were, and very clearly suggests that they were justified because Israel is worse. This is from the Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand. I posted this on social media yesterday simply with the comment, I will leave this here, because I wanted to see if my perceptions of what this statement said were wrong, and it would seem to me they are not, and that many people share my disappointment. We have asked Ben, haven't we, the Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand to come on the program. They have not communicated with us in any way. I suppose they think that we engage in hate speech, and they are certainly people who are backing Labour in wanting to restrict freedom of speech on the grounds it represents a risk to them. All right, so that's where I've started. But I say that in the context, as I say, as we must not hate. The Islamic Women's Council of New Zealand doesn't represent all New Zealanders, but we need to have a talk about what's going on and what's going on in Israel. And to help us unpack this, and I thank him very much for agreeing to come on this morning. And I'm just going to tell you that we spoke yesterday, and he was... his community is very upset. David Cumin is the president of the Israel Institute of New Zealand, and he joins us by phone now. David, how are you going this morning? Because you sounded rugged yesterday, mate, and I know you are doing it hard.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me on. It's been a very difficult time for a lot of people. You got me going again, mate. We had a vigil last night, which was lovely. There was a lot of support. Hundreds of people came out. And thank you for everyone who did. There were representatives from a number of community groups who have been very supportive throughout. And there were some MPs there as well, which at this time of the election cycle, to take a couple of hours out in an evening where they could have been campaigning to stand with Israel, to stand with the Jewish community was very, very touching. And I want to name them because I think it's very important to highlight who the good people are. Simon O'Connor has been steadfast. He turned up. Brooke Van Velden and Simon Court and Karen Chua from ACT Party all came. David sent his regards. He was in Christchurch, of course. So I think it's most important to highlight the positives in this, and I've had many people reach out just to check in.
But the truth is, David, even in this country, you had that vigil, but you had to be selective and secretive about when and where, because, alas, security concerns exist here, and these tensions exist here?
Yeah. It's not an easy thing, I think, for most Kiwis to understand, because we haven't had ongoing and violent attacks that have been well publicised or have happened. Christchurch, I think, was a watershed for a lot of people. That terror attack was awful, and we all gathered together to support the Muslim community in their darkest hour in New Zealand.
We sure did.
But unfortunately, there are undercurrents. There have been, over the years, open expression of support for Hamas, for Hezbollah, for the PFLP.
Well,
for the murder of
that's
Jews,
not illegal.
essentially.
Our government hasn't designated Hamas a terrorist organisation.
Correct. We stand apart from our Five Eyes partners and from most of the Western liberal democratic world in that respect. And it's a crying shame. And for years, I know that the Jewish community and others have been asking our government to close that loophole. Some might say that's symbolic, and partly it is, I guess, but politics is partly about symbols. But it's also practical, because having Hamas as a terrorist organisation designated in New Zealand means that Kiwis can't materially support terror. So the horrific things that we've seen over the last 72 hours, and I woke up this morning to reports of beheaded babies. I can't even say it.
Yeah.
Kiwis can materially support that because our government has chosen to artificially separate out the political wing of Hamas. And why have they chosen to do that? That's an excellent question that everyone should be asking.
Yeah. We have, in
Designation
fact, I understand, David.
No, Sean, this is important. This is important.
We have, in fact, been paying to educate people into the schools of terror, right?
Yeah. This drives to the heart, I think, of the political issues around this. And I have to say that unfortunately, it's taken 900 plus slaughtered civilians. It's taken 150 plus kidnapped civilians. It's taken beheaded babies now for some people to understand what Israel has been facing for decades. Hamas is not some freedom-fighting moral army. They are equivalent to ISIS. And for years, for decades, the people have tried to equate the Israeli Defense Force with Hamas. And the statements from our government have largely always been, we urge restraint on both sides. I hope now that some people are beginning to see that there's no equivalent here. I truly hope that. If this doesn't show it, nothing will.
Yeah.
And to hear Marama last night make the same moral equivalence is just disgusting. It's utterly disgusting. It shows a moral bankruptcy that I can't fathom. If she can't tell the difference between ISIS and the New Zealand Defence Force, I have no words.